welcome back to the Talk of Fame podcast. I'm your host, Kylie Montigney, and today I'm thrilled to introduce an inspiring change maker, Bibi Hakim. Bibi is a passionate advocate for mental health and gender equality. With an impressive background in political science and public administration from the University of Ottawa, where she focused on international relations and mental health policy. She previously served as a legislative assistant in the Parliament of Canada, where she worked closely with members of the Parliament in analyzing bills, legislative amendments, and committee reports on international trade, science and technology, government operations, and more. Her commitment to global advocacy led her to the United Nations Population Fund's Asia Pacific Regional Office in Thailand. There, she championed initiatives to eliminate gender bias violence, promote gender equality, and strengthen international mental health advocacy. She played a key role in regional constitutions and UN Commission of the Status of Women and developed a monitoring and evaluation platform used across UNFPA regional and county offices. Bibi is also the founder of Project Breaking Barriers, a campus-based initiative that creates a safe space for students to decompress and learn mental wellness practices. Her efforts sparked facility-wide recognition, leading to the creation of a scholarship supporting students facing mental health and financial struggles. Her advocacy work has reached a federal level where she authorized a policy proposal calling for accessible, affordable, inclusive mental health services. This proposal was adopted by three major political parties during the 2021 election and helped pave the way for the establishment of Canada's first federal Minister of Mental Health and Addictions. Bibi's also the proud recipient of the Duke of Edinburgh's Gold, Silver, Bronze, and Commerce Diamond Awards. I'm so honored to have her on the show. Welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you on today with us.
Thank you so much.
So to start off, you are a big into advocating for mental health and international relations. So what inspired you to study political science and administration, while also a focus on international relations and mental health?
So, at the time when I was choosing my next educational path, I didn't know what political science or public policy was. I was actually pursuing the Duke of Edinburgh's award and finishing up the gold level requirement, which actually brought me to Ottawa with the group called Forum for Young Canadians. This was a program where kids would spend a week in Ottawa and actually sit in the Legislative Assembly, in Parliament, and the Senate of Canada. And at the end of that week, my member of Parliament had organized a meeting with our Prime Minister, which was something I didn't know that was happening. So I ended up having a meeting with our Prime Minister, and he had asked, what is going to be your next journey? Are you going to go to university? Are you going to go to college? Like, are you going to go into the trades? I see that, you have this extensive background in student politics. I had my entire Pandora bracelet of how many years I've been on the student boards, and he had encouraged me to pursue public policy. So I asked, is this even a degree? And, everybody in the room kind of just laughed because, like, I didn't know that. But it was. So he told me to give it a chance. And, if I did make it through and get accepted to the universities in Ottawa, to let his office know, and they'll see if there's any internships or experiential learning that I could do. And funny enough, when I went home after that trip, I did apply. I applied to the University of Ottawa for political science and public administrations. About a couple weeks later, I came back with four different offers, and I decided to take the leap and try it out. If I didn't like it, I had the option of transferring anywhere else I wanted. After my first year in Ottawa, I decided that I wanted to keep on with it, and for me, the stars kind of aligned from there. Um, Mental health and international relations were two things that were very important to me. One, because for my home community of Toronto and Rexdale, we didn't necessarily have a lot of mental health resources, and I wanted to see how that played a role across the country. I also wanted to compare other countries and see what kind of supports they had. So learning about the UN and UN systems were also something very important to me, and I was grateful that U Ottawa provided me the opportunity to actually expand my train of thought and like what I was actually interested in for those
That's
areas.
awesome. Because I know with the US, mental health is kind of like a bigger thing now than it was a few years ago, especially with mental health services, counseling, and all that. That has really become huge. But to be honest with you, this might sound pretty crazy to people, but I honestly didn't know about public policy major until probably 2 years ago. Like I
Absolutely.
literally
I didn't know
in a
myself.
college senior right now, and I was like, "How's public policy a major?" Because I really didn't know what it was. I mean, I was always interested in politics and all that, especially the U.S. politics. I was always interested in that and public policy and all that, but I didn't know it was an actual major. I thought it was like that's a thing that the government does here in the U.S.
So, and same thing for my home community, right? Like, I mean, like I come from a brown family. Like my parents are from the Caribbean, and like if you dive deeper, from India and the Middle East. But for my family, there's always a stereotype that like the brown kids only have three options, which is like being an engineer, a
Mhm.
doctor, or a lawyer. So that's something that my parents preached to me as a child. And I will say they were a little disappointed to hear that I was not going to be either of those.
Which is perfectly fine. You don't need to do
Right.
those things as based off like what your color or skin tone is.
Yeah, which is completely fine, but it's like I would say that government and public policy is just an extension of the legal branch because you're just doing something different. Like you're not necessarily in the courtroom defending the law, but you're actually in the chamber writing and debating the law. So,
Yeah,
I,
that which is probably more funner than just being in a chamber itself. I'll probably rather make a law or something than being sitting in a chamber just sitting there and being bored the whole time.
but
But like I was wondering, like with Canada and public policy, what is that like? Like how does it usually work? Because I don't know much about it, but with the US, that's kind of like a big thing. I know a lot of like advocates, specifically mental health, right, really doing, especially right now in 2025.
So with public policy, there's different branches, and the branch that I have experience with is the legislative branch. So usually when there is a bill, it would be debated in our chamber, and then from our chamber, it would go to a smaller group of folks called committee. And that committee is made up of government members and opposition. And I know for you guys, you only have two opposition parties, which is the Democrats and the Social Party. I'm
It's
not
the
sure.
Democrat and Republican that are two of the major ones. But there's
Okay,
also like independent, but that's kind of like the third party that like is not really talked about enough. But the main ones are Republican and Democrat.
so we have something similar to you guys, but we have a little bit more. So our main parties are Liberal and Conservative, but
Mm.
we also have NDP, Green, and Bloc Québécois, which is we kind of call them the resistance group of the Quebec folks, because they want to protect Quebec language and stuff like that. So essentially, our committees will be made up proportionally of those members. And that's where the bill will be debated. We'll invite stakeholders and different experts to kind of testify and see, is this bill worth pursuing? Is there any amendments? From there, it'll go back to the Green Chamber to be debated for a second time. Then it will go to the Senate. Usually there's a cabinet meeting on it with our ministers, depending on the legislation and depending how important that issue is. There's multiple meetings that take place at that time, and then it comes back to the chamber with all of those edits from the Senate for one last debate. And then if it passes into law. If it fails, go through the entire cycle again. On the advocacy front, there's many opportunities to talk to lawmakers. Either you talk to their staff or you get face-to-face time with a member of parliament or the Senate or senator, sorry, or you actually get FaceTime with the minister or prime minister if you're lucky. So with my public policy that I actually got to draft and pass, um, I wrote it as a university paper because we were given an assignment of if you had to create a public policy, what would you like to see? And in turn, because I was working on Parliament, I had access to all of these people. I started having conversations with ministers and MPs and folks from across the floor to see if this idea could even be reality. And
Mhm.
that's kind of where I would tweak my paper every so often just to encompass the changes and amendments.
Mhm.
And because I had support from ministers and MPs of with the idea, I was able to pass it up the chain and actually formalize a proposal that went to the Liberal Party. In 2021, that was a very contentious election because it was COVID. And
Mhm.
I had a bunch of friends that were in the NDP and Conservative Party that actually helped me get my proposal to their convention floor. And I was floored when all three parties accepted the proposal as it was. And it became a big election issue because people were so isolated with COVID. And then when the governing party won, which was the Liberal Party, they ended up taking my policy paper and running with it. It was in their platform, it was in the speech from the throne, and it eventually became an entire department, which was mental health and addictions. And we saw the first minister of mental health and addictions with significant funding. I think it was $198.6 billion for the next 10 years to support our healthcare system and new money for mental health support.
That's crazy because that's kind of how the US was like during that like year that was the big election time here in US. So it was kind of like between like the pandemic issues, mental health issues, riots that was going on. It was kind of between a bunch of issues that was going on during that time. Because right now, like when the 2024 and the 2020 election happened, those were two separate things that two separate people talked about. It was like two separate issues. But the way Canada's like government, like in terms of passing bills, that's kind of how the US government is kind of similar to that. Usually, if you are in a smaller state, maybe like where I am in Pennsylvania, usually like we have like a bunch of like congressmen, representatives here in the area. So whether if you know maybe a congressman or something, you always go to them because maybe if they're interested in that bill, they might do it for you just because they have a higher spot in it. I don't know how that system works in Canada though, but usually if you know like a congressman or something, they usually help out in kind of exploring all that. Because I know if you're someone in the government, you of course have more resources than maybe like a regular high school individual.
So ministers for us can table a bill whenever they please. For backbench MPs, there's a lottery system, so they actually get slotted a number, and they're able to introduce something called a private members bill. So if the idea or policy proposal doesn't become a government priority that's outlined in the platform from the election, members also have a second opportunity through the private members bill to put forward it on the floor. So that's kind of like how you kind of have two chances to like see it on the floor. I got lucky that it became a government priority. So it was something that was prioritized on the government agenda. But I can't imagine like what it would have been like if it was a private member's bill because that often gets pushed aside a little bit
Mhm.
depending on how urgent the government priorities are. So if, for example, like we were trying to pass our finances at one point and like everything got pushed aside to ensure that we had enough debate time for
Mhm.
finances because without that, like our departments don't operate, right? Like you need to pass operational funding.
That is true. Like that's something I didn't know. Is I think for the US, like I think it's always a one-time thing. If you the local governments or whatever, how much higher you get up. But if you don't get it for that one time, I don't think you can do it again, or unless it's like a different type of bill.
Yeah.
I don't know how much like, it usually works, to be honest, but I think it's always like a one-time thing here, like in the US, I believe. I could be totally wrong, but I think it's always like depends on what bill you desire passing, to be honest.
There's a
So
lot of negotiation happen behind the scenes too.
that is true. So you went to University of Ottawa, and can you share a moment during your time there that shaped your passion for being public change?
For sure. So I think it became very clear to me in my first public policy class, which was PAP 101 with Professor David Brown. So he gave us 10 templates and he had told us that, you know, you might not have me for all 4 years, depending on like what you choose in your career path or what you decide to do with your degree. But I'm going to give you these 10 templates, and this is going to help shape how you learn public policy. And he gave us the assignment of if you could create any public policy as normal or outlandish as your heart desires, what would it be? And you're going to use these 10 templates to kind of craft your policy. So I had a very hard time thinking of what I would want for this assignment and like how far I can run with it. So it wasn't until like I started walking around campus and started like reflecting on like my home community and my now new community in Ottawa because I was first year student, and I saw that the mental health crisis was something that was starting to get bigger. In my first semester, I ended up losing a couple of classmates. In middle school, I nearly lost a classmate, and I was lucky to find her in time before anything bad happened. So a lot of those thoughts were kind of circling in my mind. I was like, okay, like if I'm going to create this policy or this assignment, how can I help the people that I've come across in the past? And that's kind of where I was like, okay, like what if we had more resources, but what does that resource look like? It's one thing to say that you want accessible services, but like what are those services?
Mm.
So I started doing a little bit of research and like talking to students that openly admitted to having like mental health concerns and issues, and they shared with me some of the barriers that they were experiencing. And I kind of used those conversations to shape the public policy that is now something that is seen in Canada.
That's amazing. To like witness that, like see people literally about to quit, I can't imagine being able to do that. I was honestly, if I was in that position, I wouldn't be able to recover from that. I'd be like, what if this happens to me? Like, what if people find me in this position? I'm not saying it's happening, but I'm just saying if that's the worst case scenario, I can't imagine. But just like actually be affected by something like mental health, and not a lot of people like to talk about it. Like, especially for me, like only tell a few selected people if I'm struggling with maybe anxiety or depression or whatever it is. I don't tell like everyone in the world, and that's like the certain position some people are in because maybe they feel embarrassed that they're struggling or they just kind of don't want really anyone to know, and that's perfectly okay. Like everyone's gonna be there for you even if you don't want to tell them or not. But to have like a public policy to really talk about is really just amazing because not everyone should have to go through depression or anxiety just because of a specific thing or a family matter or whatever that may position could be.
The thing is, like everybody has mental health, right? It's not just the fact, it's not the statistic of one in two people experience like mental health. Everybody has mental
Yeah,
health,
everyone experiences it like in like some
in a
short,
different
I mean,
way.
some sort of shape or form.
Absolutely.
Like what does really mental health mean to you? Because I know you really advocate for a lot of people, especially in Canada with mental health issues and all of that. But what does it really mean to you personally?
For me, it's protecting your mind and your mental peace, and allowing yourself to be able to feel what you feel, right? Like if you have a broken arm, you're gonna go to the hospital and seek some sort of like medical help, right? If I'm experiencing anxiety or depression, I should also be able to go to a doctor and seek medical help
Mm,
without shame or without embarrassment. And I think for me, what it means is being able to ask for the things that you need that is going to help with your well-being,
mm.
right? So it's not just like, oh, mental health is like how you take care of your mind. At the end of the day, it's your entire well-being.
Exactly. Like you should
That's what I
treat
think.
like your mental health like the same way as if you broke a leg. Well, of course it's a different case scenario, don't get me wrong, but it's like you should treat it as if you broken a leg during a softball game or something, whatever that case may be.
Yeah, like your brain is still an organ. You might not be able to see it because it's inside of your body, but it's the same thing when you're having a heart attack, right? Like if I'm gonna go to the hospital for a heart attack, which is an internal organ, I should be able to go to seek help for another organ in my body without having like stigmatized judgment, right?
No, seriously, whether it's talking to a therapist, getting medication, or talking to people about it, see what we can do to get through this specific thing, you know? Like anything, like to ask for help is literally makes you so strong. I'd rather someone to go ask for help, get medication for it, or find a therapist and rather sit in bed and not doing anything at all.
Absolutely.
So to change so we talked a little bit about this before, but you work as a legislative assistant in the Paramount of Canada at such a young age. Like, what is kind of lo like to see kind of all the behind the scenes of all that, especially in Canada? Like, that has to be crazy, especially if this being an election year there.
Yeah, so right now I'm currently the Senior Parliamentary Affairs Assistant and Parliamentary Secretary Aide to the Minister of Transport and Parliamentary Secretary to Transport. When I was the legislative assistant, I was also their executive assistant, kind of just managing their offices and keeping them on track for legislation. And I think for me, to be able to get into it's a privilege and an honor.
Mhm.
I come from a community called Rexdale, and like I never imagined that this is where my career path will ever end up. I always thought of myself as a high school dropout or doing something else. To be able to be part of our democracy and be on the national stage with our politicians and giving them advice on different issues has been a very surreal experience because at the end of the day, we're tackling issues that everyday Canadians face. And being part of that solution I've always been taught to be part of the solution and not part of the problem. It's one thing to complain about an issue, but to bring forward an idea and be able to see that all the way through is something that I've always wanted to do. And I I'm very thankful for this experience, and I hope that one day I'm granted the honor of becoming a member of parliament or even Prime Minister of Canada to continue advocating for Canadians.
I'm sure you will. Well, you have experience at such a young age, which is awesome because not a lot of people start working in the government or at least get that experience at such a young age. Usually, they'll probably wait until maybe their mid 30s, 40s, or once they kind of get like adult age when they get a job. But to you, like to see such a young individual kind of starting to get that experience is awesome because any experience counts for the future, like whatever you it may be, and whether it's government, education, media, whatever it may be, like any experience matters, no matter how old you are. It's never too late to start.
Absolutely.
So the last thing I have to ask you before we head off is like, what's next for you in your career?
I'm not sure right now. I think I'm waiting to see how this election pans out. I've always wanted to go to law school, so we'll see if I get admitted into law school. I think, the hopes and dreams is one day I will run as a member of parliament from my home area of Etobicoke North, which is my home riding. And in turn, if I am granted that opportunity, I hope that one day I'm able to run for leader of a party and become our prime minister. I think it's important to have young women and young women of color run for office and see diversity in our halls of power and in within parliament. And I hope that one day Canadians grant me the opportunity of becoming the first elected woman of color to be their prime minister.
I'm sure they will because there's not a lot of people, especially a woman specifically in the government. Like I know for the US specifically, there's more male than female in the government, specifically where I am, all congressmen and like representatives, besides one person, which is a female, but it's not in my district, but it's all male. All male are literally covering my district, which is so hard to see. But I mean, there's some, I'm not saying they're bad people. Don't get me wrong, not all men are like specifically in government are bad people.
I just don't
But
understand the issues that we see and like how we experience it. Like I think one of the politicians that I've been watching closely from your side is AOC.
oh, I
Um,
know who she is, yeah.
yeah, I think she's been somebody who like has been a very interesting politician for me to watch. So
Like
I think in Canada, it's 33% of women in our last election are within parliament, and we're hoping to see that change. Our election is on April 28th, so we'll see who makes it into office this time around.
I know. Like ours isn't like our like pre-election primaries is in May. And
Yeah.
then our main election's in November. So luckily the main election is already done and over with. We don't have to deal with it for another 4 years. Thankfully, that was like a very interesting time and crazy time to see what's going on with like the local elections and also like the federal government elections. But with everything going on, like I was like, I just want to see a woman in office. No matter if you are a representative, a congressman, or a president. I'm like, I just want to see it while I'm alive. That's all I have to say. I'd rather see it at some point.
So we'll see. I think the future is going to be female, and I think the last thing I'll leave off is I said this quote on my graduation with the Toronto Police Youth and Policing Program. It's believe you can and you can conquer anything. Don't wait for the perfect moment because it doesn't exist. Instead, take the moment and make it perfect. And if opportunity does knock, put yourself out there and build yourself a door.
True. You have to be the change that you don't see. That is true. But I really appreciate you coming on and taking the time to chat with us at your busy schedule. I'm sure election time coming up. I'm sure things have been cr pretty crazy. But I wish you the best of luck of everything. It takes a lot of courage to do things, especially in the government at higher up levels. So I give you a round of applause for all of that. I really appreciate you coming on and taking the time to chat with us about everything. It means so much.
Thank you. And thank you for everything that you do for your community. It's kind of cool to see from the Canadian perspective, like young women like you, like pave the way for the next generation. So I also applaud you and everything that you do. And thank you so much for your time and having me in your space.
Thank you. That means so much. Thank you everyone for listening. I'll make sure to put all of her social medias and stuff below for you guys to check out and keep updates on her. But I hope you guys enjoy this episode. Make sure to like, subscribe, and review, and I'll talk to you guys very soon.